the way that recruiting has continued to evolve, it strikes me just where these teenagers are now in command in some ways of a personal business. It's almost like they're all individual small business owners because they have to be in control of their personal brand and evaluating different opportunities that they'll have from one school to the next.
Welcome back, or welcome to Y Option National Championship Edition. Yogi Roth, of course, always joined by Jim Thornby. And today we welcome longtime friend, I could say now longtime colleague from Pac-12 to the BTN Network. Anthony Herron was a star player at Iowa, spent some time in the NFL, is dialed in on the Chicago Bears. So yes, we will go there, but also is totally plugged in on this championship game. He'll be covering the game all weekend long, including Monday from the BTN Network studios. He dropped by from the studios, Jim, to give us some insight. And there were some other people that he was working with at the studios that were like, you got Jerry DiNardo on it, you got Ashley on it, you got Anthony on it, like you got Red on it, you got Guy, like really? And I'm like, okay, I got off-season schedule. We're filling it up. We got you, brother. Mike Hall, you're coming on. Okay, don't worry. Yeah, exactly. So, Jim, how you feeling? It's weird. It's like the back half of a week. You got NFL playoffs, but it's also like the middle of the week if you went to like the traditional football week with the game on Monday night.
Yeah, it's super weird. And just one more thing on Anthony, because I didn't even realize it like till halfway through the interview, and then I started laughing. Is that, because he was in between taping things on Big Ten, like he was still like wired up. Like you can see he's still got the mic on here and everything. So when you notice all that, like what is that? Like he was like ready to, as soon as this is over, go back on the air. And so thank you.
No sweatshirt. Yeah.
No
hoodie.
Yeah, it was literally like, we're good. Let's roll. So thank you again to Anthony for jumping on with us there.
I love that. All right, so championship game, it's set. It's really cool to watch the build-up. We saw the numbers eventually come out in terms of who watched the semifinal game on a Thursday and a Friday. The build-up for this game is so unique because there's so many things happening in the sport. And here we are in the longest season in the history of the sport. And both teams in this championship game will be playing their 16th game, which, yes, that is an NFL regular season. So here we sit. Notre Dame, not nearly as healthy as Ohio State. Ohio State dealt with their health stuff seemingly mid-season and then has gotten stronger since then. Where do you surmise? Like, how do you surmise this one, Jim, as we dive into it a little bit here?
Yeah, and it was interesting too, because you mentioned the ratings on the semifinals. The one thing that I didn't even consider, and then I read an article about that last night, was, normally, quote unquote, normally, like we've been doing this for decades, but normally those semifinals have been on New Year's Day. So it's like, that's also part of the reason, another part of the reason that the numbers were down, but not like down significantly. And I think if you just look at the playoffs as a whole, you have more people watching each of those games as a volume. So in the end, I think it's going to all net out around the same. But the game itself, I mean, you have two absolutely historic programs in college football. I mean, as much flack as ESPN got in the postseason for being SEC homers, like I think they're probably doing backflips over the fact that they got Ohio State and Notre Dame in this matchup. Like there will be plenty of eyeballs on this game on Monday night. Now there will be a lot of other things going on in the world on Monday that we don't need to get into here, but as far as Monday night, there will be a lot of eyeballs on this college football game, and it's going to be a good one. I mean, you have, like I said, it's just two historic programs. What we're seeing now too is like what you have to do to get to here. So like I'll kind of skip ahead to something that I wrote down here. Just looking at these coaches, like, so if Ohio State wins this game, this would give them 6 wins against top 10 teams this season. 6. I mean, like, that's just insane. Obviously, that's the most they've had. I went back to 1980 for them. I stopped at that point. They haven't had that. They had 6 wins against top 10 teams the previous 3 years combined. So, I mean, they will have earned it. if they have done this. And Notre Dame, the cool angle on this is that, this is the third season for Marcus Freeman and there at Notre Dame. And you look back historically with Notre Dame, Frank Leahy, what did he do in his third season? Won the national title. Eric Parseghian, what did he do in his third season? Won the national title. Dan Devine, what did he do in the third season? Won the national title. And Lou Holtz, what did he do in the third season? Won the national title. Cool. So it's like,
so let me.
There's all these cool little storylines in there, just even before we get to like the actual players on the field.
Okay, so if I'm a fan of West Coast football, right, or just college football through the lens of the West, I think it's appropriate to bring this point up. Then where do we net out on coaches in their third season? Right? I mean, I think it's unfair to be like, well, Marcus Freeman went to the Natty. What's up with Lincoln Riley? Like, I think the what they inherited was totally different. Like, Brian Kelly's getting crushed right now, but you look at what he's done when he was there. I mean, they were perennial double-digit win teams. I mean, this program wasn't down by any stretch when he went to LSU. You could argue Marcus Freeman, his energy, his vibe, his likability, yeah, like all those things I think are noteworthy comments. But it's not like he took a program that was in shambles and took it to a new place. For Ryan Day, we know what the standard is at Ohio State. That's just what it is, and it's been a powerhouse since. I mean, I was going to say Jim Tressel, but even before then, right? Like, I mean, it's just been going on forever and ever and ever. Like since we as long as we know football. Yeah. So I think it's interesting because I think we'll hear that of like, I get those texts a lot. Like this guy in year 3, how are we not there in year 3? You look at so it's interesting because on one hand, I think to be thoughtful, it's like, well, look at what Kalen DeBoer did in his 3rd year. Right at Washington, was that what his 3rd year he went to the Natty?
No, that was only
2nd year.
Second year. He was only there 2 years.
Yeah, so he went 4-8 in year 1, or he took over a team that was 4-8. Then they won 9 or 10 games or whatever it was, and then they went to the national championship game. So there's a world of that where you're like, but their roster was really good, right? And you could say what you want about Jimmy Lake. Jimmy Lake's a dear friend of mine, so I will not be on the bandwagon that jumps on him. But I just think they're all so unique. Like what Lincoln Riley took over, dramatically different than what Kalen DeBoer took over. You'd look at Arizona and Jed Fish. They got to 10 wins pretty like in his 3rd season. They were terrible when he took over. And then you look at the strategy of the build. Jed was high school. Lincoln was portal. Kalen was retention and a couple additions, notably, of course, Michael Penix Jr., some running like Wayne Taligapapa pops into my mind, like a running back that he had. Remember out of Virginia as a transfer. They had a couple guys. They had a linebacker from Pitt, but it wasn't wholesale by any stretch. So I just think like as we get into this and Monday night, it'll be topical of like, look at the turnaround, regardless of what happens in the game. So I think that's kind of a cool underlying story. My favorite storyline by far is that Marcus Freeman played at Ohio State.
Yeah.
And I get they've played each other the last 2 years, so nobody wants to really like that story's been played out.
Right.
But he started his coaching career. And if I go back to like why, I don't know if this is true for you, but why I fell in love with TV and broadcasting was Sundays on NBC watching Ahmad Rashad lead into Bob Costas and the open of the game. And the open to me was always captivating. It's why like Guy Haber and my partner and I at the Big Ten Network, we are obsessed about the opens. Like it's really just cool. And I think this year in the Big Ten, our open sometimes, Jim, would be 10 minutes because they wanted to milk the run out or the walkout and the tunnel and the crazy crowd in Lincoln, Nebraska, or whatever it might have been. I love that for this game because the ESPN will find a way to do it. And look, I am a big Chris Fowler fan. I think you look at somebody at the stage of his career when he went over to just do play-by-play and where he's gone from the beginning of that tenure to now, like, I think he nails big moments. He nails games. And he's one of the greatest orators of our life. So I'm like just so enthused because of that storyline. You're right. Possibly 6 top 10 wins with the only loss at Oregon by 1 point. And here comes Notre Dame, 2 teams, easily the most challenging of paths. Neither team with a bye, rabid fan bases, and then cut to Lou Holtz in the crowd, cut to Urban in the Hall of Fame on the sideline. Like, it's just going to be sick, man. Like, I just like the game, of course, but I'm kind of juiced for the open too.
Oh yeah, I mean, and I know he's very much downplayed this, so I won't make a big deal out of it. But he'll be the first, African American head
Yeah.
coach in this situation on Martin Luther King Day. I mean, like, that's all kind of crazy. So, but again, he's very much downplaying that. Every time I've seen him be asked about it, he quickly pivots that question. So, but to your point, yeah, ESPN will definitely, that Open will be pretty epic.
Yeah.
For
And I'll tell you
this
what,
game.
I work for the Big Ten, but I don't have like a allegiance either way. I'm just friends with guys on both staffs. So I just want a great game. But in my house, it's kind of like it's torn because there's like the Chip Kelly side, like my kids, my wife, we're huge fans. And then there's like Marcus Freeman. Like my wife grew up in Korea. She's 100% Korean. Like she's like, dude, we got a Korean head coach. Let's go. So it'll be fun. We'll be rooting. Our flags will be out. We can't wait. Or their flags will be out. I'll be in Chicago covering this on the Big Ten Network pregame show. Tune in. It's a couple hours long. It's going to be a blast. As soon as we're done here, Jim, I'll be back to the film and the grind, preparing that. But in the meantime, let's talk about this game. We've got an Ohio State offense that, to me, seemingly has no weaknesses. Now, I know they do. They're not perfect up front on the offensive line, but they are special with, you could argue, if the draft happened, I don't know, like, who is the number one pick if everybody's available? Like, Jeremiah Smith's in the top 5. He's the number 1 receiver taken. I could say that. It's a monster.
I think it would be between him and Ryan Williams at Alabama. The two, I mean,
the two freshmen.
The two
one's like 17. Yeah.
The two freshman wide receivers that are both like insane.
Yeah.
And I know he won't go in that high, like in the real draft. But I mean, there's not too many football players in America better than Caleb Downs. But like, that's on the other side of the ball. But sticking with the offense, like, yeah, this Ohio State offense is insanely talented. I mean, you look at what happened. We mentioned this before. You look at happened with Texas, and they quote unquote, took Jeremiah Smith out of the game. 1 reception, 3 yards, 3 targets. And what happened? The other 3, Tate, Ibuka, and Scott, they combined for 17 receptions, 168 yards on 21 targets. They didn't have a touchdown. All the touchdowns in that game, I think, were all running backs other than Jack Sawyer. So even if you are able to like have a strategy where you're able to take Jeremiah out of this game, they got the dudes to just keep rolling on there. So, like, as we've seen in these playoff games.
Okay, so an interesting note. So I think it's so fun to like put on different hats when you're talking about the game. So that's like just straight up an analyst hat. Let me go Ohio State fan hat or Ohio State Big Ten Network hat. Like, you're just going to go with the positive. Explosive offense, dynamic playmakers, Will Howard playing as good as he ever has. You could argue the best defense in the country. Every layer, they have NFL players. That is truth and some fandom. All right, let's flip it over. Let's go to the other side. Well, offensively, if you look at the game against Texas, it was nowhere near as efficient as Texas and Oregon. Outside of the first drive, I don't want to say they get lucky, but like, how many times is anybody going to throw a screen for 75 yards in the final minute of the half? Like,
right.
Everything had to go right? The defensive call had to be wrong. Like, it's one play. And then it's 1st and goal at the 1, and it's a sack-caused fumble to the house. Like, there is that side where you're like, well, they have 8 penalties, I think, in the game. I think it was the most they had all season long, definitely the most they had in the playoffs. False starts, self-inflicted penalties. And part of that is like, get out of our own way. But part of that is also like maybe who you are in high-stress environments. So I think that it's like when I keep going back to when I was at SC and we played Texas. I got the game ball up there. I very rarely try to ever look at it because it's a horrible reminder. But the reminder is we were the best team in like a century. We were easily the best team in a decade. And we lost the championship game. Well, why? Well, Reggie turned the ball over because he tried to be heroic. Brad Walker, love Brad, Coach Brad. But he tried to flip it to him as he's running for a massive explosive play. And then clearly don't convert on a 4th down and give up a couple big plays. Like, there's a world where this works. Like, we had a drop on 3rd down, play action pass to the left. I could see it right now. I won't reference his name, but I'm like, that's the game. I can 827 Y box was the call, and it's a wrap. So this is a championship game, folks. Let's not make a mistake about it. So let's go to the other side. Here's Notre Dame. And on one hand, if you're, let's just say you're an Ohio State fan, you're saying, they can't throw the ball. Riley Leonard, man, he's just an average quarterback. And I would say, you know what? Among the 4 in the semifinals, he'd be the last one I would take if I was building my team. But he is not asked to throw it 35 times a game. He is not asked to pick apart a defense and be surgical. He's proven he can do that. Look no further than the Georgia game when he had to. He's asked to put the team on his back. Quarterback run game, designed runs, RPOs, leadership traits seemingly through the roof. Like, they have an offensive line that's impressive. They got running backs that are explosive. They can take it to the house. We saw what Texas did with the running backs out of the backfield creatively against this Ohio State defense. We saw what Oregon did with them against them at times with running backs. We've seen other teams throughout the season have success. So I just think that, like, to sit here and be like, it's a wrap, it takes me so back to 2005. And I'm like, it's not. Like, I just don't think it is. Capable, who's capable of winning by 2 touchdowns? Only one team. Who's capable of running out, and blowing a team out, the doors off this thing? Only one team. But Notre Dame is very capable, to your point, of winning this game on January 20th, which would be a historic day for many reasons for the Irish eyes to be smiling, if we will. Take your line from Jerry DiNardo on our show earlier this week. So I just say all that of, like, there needs to be context. Okay, so I'll pause what you got there, and then I'll give you my matchup I'm most excited to see.
Ready, set. Use French fries to go. Yeah, oil from French fries. Turn yesterday's leftovers into today's fuel. More power, lower emissions. 76 renewable diesel fuels all the ways you go, go, go.
Yeah, well, I think, the one thing I'll throw out there, can you talk about, like, opportunistic? The one stat that I know you love is the middle eight.
It's insane.
Notre Dame outscoring their opponents 30-3 in the middle eight here in the CFP in those 3 games. So, like, they've really, and each one of they've gotten that, like, right at the end of the half, like, score, like, in the last game, like, that completely changed the entire mindset of that game. Like, without that drive at the end of the half, I mean, Penn State was kicking their butt. I mean, right. on both. They were dominating both sides of the line, and then Leonard went out. And they bring in the backup, and the backup marches them down, and they're able to get on the board. And it's just like, oh, this is actually a game. And I think, like, the whole mindset of that changed going to that second half. So, like, if Notre Dame can continue to be that little pesky team that just kind of can stay in the game, and then they wind up going ahead. And it's funny because the one thing, obviously Notre Dame has a great defense. They played tremendously all year. But as I was kind of going through their games yesterday, the one thing that I kind of chuckled at, because, there's only one team all season that's put up more than 24 points against Notre Dame, that's put up 400 total yards. Only one team has done that, and it was the same team that did both of that. Your USC Trojans.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right.
It was like, I mean, of all the team, like, you think about, like, all the things that's happened this year, and that was a game that USC was right there in the mix, if not for those two pick sixes. So that's why it makes this Notre Dame team so hard to really kind of wrap your arms around about who they really are, because are they the most talented team in the country? No. But they just find ways to win.
And I think that I just go back to, like, I don't think their regular season schedule was dramatically challenging. And that's why I was wrong.
And not to their own fault. Like,
no doubt. I picked
it was
Indiana.
Not their fault that Florida State was terrible this year. They had that game circled, like, oh yeah, we're playing Florida State, and it's just like,
Totally. And I think the bounce back that they had to come back from Northern Illinois, you could argue was greater than Ohio State coming back to their loss to Oregon. Yeah. Because for Notre Dame with no conference, and as James Franklin pointed out, like, no conference championship game, it was basically win or go home. Like, they had to win out the rest of the way, and that was week 2, right? Week 2 or week 3 when they lose to Northern Illinois. So yeah, it is a challenging path that they've been on, and I think dramatically proven in the playoff. Couple follow-ups. The middle eight this season, Notre Dame 148-17. So it's not like they've just hit it in the playoff.
Right.
This is who they are. I still think the special teams play against Georgia, top 2 special teams play we've seen all season. I mean, number 1, I would say, is UNLV's fake punt against Cal. like if my mind's going right to it. But running 11 guys on, 11 guys off, and getting a false start or getting offsides penalty, like that was huge. And then you referenced the backup quarterback. What did McAfee call him? Peanut butter and jelly, like and jelly. Who I remember preparing for his game last year because he did the Stanford game and he was the backup. We didn't know how much Sam Hartman was going to play, etc. And they're confident in him. But for you look back at what he did, A, they threw it, and then B, he fumbled it, and then they recovered it. Like, you're right, things had to happen for this team. And I'll say this, and this is a scarred, pained former player coming at you live right now. My Notre Dame experience, there were so many times as a player, actually every time as a player, we played Notre Dame, we were up late, and you think you're going to close it out. And here came Carlisle Holiday. Here came somebody. And you're just like, there's a Notre Dame thing. Like, I don't know. Like, it just feels like the echoes, the juice, the vibe. Like, it's like,
They don't call it the luck of the Irish for nothing.
Yeah, like there's always a thing. Like, look at the field goal. It's like, boom, right in the middle. So I hope we get that. I hope we get a great classic game. Okay, to your point, let's pivot because I went to dinner last night with somebody who is just dialed in on the USC Trojans. And we were talking about them and we're like, should have beat Penn State. To your point, like had a shot against Notre Dame. I mean, I think they were outplayed all game, but they had a shot. I thought they outplayed Penn State, other than Tyler Warren's 16 grabs that game.
Yeah.
And there they are in year 3. So you kind of circle back to that year 3 conversation because we're going to have Anthony Herron on, and we're going to talk this game, but he's also going to talk about the All-American Bowl he called on NBC about a week and a half ago or so. So I think there's this like, how do you view your team as we end the season? And maybe we play that game next week of like, what lens do we view our teams out here? Like, are we optimistic? Are we pessimistic? Do we not know? Because I think there's a world at SC when they watch the playoff, and I'll never forget year 1 of Lincoln Riley. It's TCU, Georgia. At the time, his brother Garrett was the OC at TCU. I go to the game. It's pouring rain. Pre-game, it's not. And the only reason I went to the game was for pre-game warm-ups because I wanted to walk the field. I wanted to give Max Duggan a shout-out and say hi to him, Elite 11 guy. But I wanted to just kind of have a lens on what's the size like? How do guys look? And as I'm walking around the field, I see Coach Riley, and we dap each other up, say what's up, and he goes, "Hey man, we're close. Like we're gonna get here." And I'm like, "Of course you're gonna get here. Like you're no doubtedly you're going to get here. Like that's exactly right. Like why wouldn't they? Or they were a snap away or a healthy Caleb Williams away from getting there that actual season." And now you look at what their season was, 18 points, or I think it was 15 or 18 points, or all their combined losses. I'm like, man, they got a real legit shot to continue to make moves. So we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out because I know like the optimism there is pretty high.
Yeah, and this is that season of optimism. Now that you've kind of removed yourselves from this. We're going to be close to a month away since almost anybody besides these playoff teams have played a snap. So like, it is that season of optimism where you're acquiring players. You're no longer recruiting players; you're acquiring players, and building these teams out. And so I think there is that level of it's that time to get excited again.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so real quick before we punch out to our conversation with Anthony, who do you think wins the game? This is our final preview. This is our final episode we're going to do before the game happens.
I'm worried about Notre Dame's offensive line. I mean, no doubt. They haven't had their starting, what they thought was going to be their starting offensive line together at any point in the season. They lost one guy in fall camp, and they've just been kind of rotating around. They lost 2 more in the Orange Bowl. One of them definitely not coming back for this game. Another one, they might move some guys around. The guy who was originally going to be the starter at left tackle, who got hurt in fall camp, he might now come back and play at left tackle. Who knows? We'll see how that all plays out. But if Notre Dame's able to run the ball, which they haven't been able to do as well as each of these games have gone along, and protect the quarterback, because Ohio State's defense has been all over, I think they've got a real shot. I don't know what it is. It's not a reasoned prediction. It's literally just a feeling of like watching these games at Notre Dame and just always finding a way to go through that. I think they have a real shot here. I mean, to your point, they could get down 2 touchdowns like that, and then it'd be a walk. But I think they're going to hang around, and I think we're going to see. I think it's going to be another great game, like is what we've seen with the semis, as these games have just gotten better and better.
Wow,
Let's go ahead and just say it. I mean, why not? There's nothing holding me back here. I think Notre Dame gets somehow edges this game out.
Okay, all right, there it is, Jim Thornby picking the Irish. When I look at this game, I think a couple things jump out to me, right? We detailed some of the thoughts around each team. I think the matchup, of course, like how is Notre Dame and Al Golden, what is he going to do? He's a mastermind. This guy's coached defense at every level, at the highest of levels. What's his game plan going to be? I think it's going to be really fun to watch it. I'd say the same thing with Jim Knowles. Who are they going to spy the quarterback with? How are they going to change up different looks to force him to hold onto the ball a little bit longer? The best defenses, to me, tell you where to throw in the passing game, whether they're rolling coverage. Challenge Notre Dame is they don't really have anybody you want to roll to necessarily. You have to roll to. So do they play it straight up? That version of the game, I would imagine, is what Ohio State does. And I think they also piggyback of what they did against Texas and expect a tremendous amount of pressure. I think they had 4 blitzes per game in their first 2 rounds. I talked to Ryan Day on set after the Rose Bowl, and I said, hey, Coach, I felt like you didn't blitz. He goes, yeah. I asked Coach Knowles, like, are we ever going to blitz in this game? And he's like, no, we're good. We're good. So I don't think this is a game where you play coverage. I think it's kind of like what they did against Texas. Now, you can get burned on that, on wheel routes, on things like that. But you're going to force Notre Dame's quarterback, Riley Leonard, to really, I think, you want him to speed up his process. Now, he's played a ton of football. You got 2 true vets in the game going up against one another. So how does he navigate that? We shall see. I think on the flip side, Chip Kelly in this offense, man, I mean, it won't be easy to the point I just referenced about Al Golden, but if they can run the football, QB run game, I think will be a factor. But ultimately, I think this is going to feel like what I've said all year, like a Big Ten game, where like, wouldn't be shocked if it's 1.5 possessions in the first quarter. Yeah. I looked at the Texas game. I was charting possessions. I think they both had like 9 before half, 8.5 or 9 before the first half. Like they were just rolling possessions because there were a bunch of 3-and-outs, especially on the Ohio State side after that first drive. So I think it'll be a limited possession game, which I think why it's going to be tight. But I think at the end of the day, what Ohio State had to do against Texas, which was meet adversity, right? They didn't blow them out. They felt like they had it on the first drive, and then all of a sudden it's, whoa. My question was, were they going to revert back to a team that played tight against Michigan, played tight in other games this season? They didn't. I thought they cut it loose. They made plays when they had to. Obviously, the defense elevated and won that game for them. I think this is an Ohio State team that as it gets harder in this game, I think they're going to be looser. And I think they have to be. You know, Ryan Day has referenced many times, this is a great story, but we have to win. I think this team is built for that dialogue because of what they went through in Michigan and probably more recently what they went through against Texas. Like I was on the sideline there in that game. There was no doubt. There was no doubt by that team. They didn't have that look. They didn't have that feel. And they didn't call it less aggressive. So I think Ohio State wins. I think they do pull away. I think they end up winning by 2 scores, kind of like they did in the Texas game. But I think we get a whale of a game. I don't think this is Alabama, Notre Dame by any stretch, or Notre Dame, Indiana by any stretch, or SMU, Penn State by any stretch, or any of the Ohio State games in advance of last week. So I hope we are keyed in for that. I'm going to pick the Buckeyes. It's going to be a post-game celebration, and then it's going to be the debate, which conference reigns supreme. It won't be a debate in certain regions of the country. It'll be a massive debate in the South, in that part of the country. And there's a lot going on in college football that we'll detail and dive into in other episodes. Okay, so with that, let's get to our guest. Anthony Herron, an elite player, an elite friend, and I think a very gifted broadcaster. He does games, he does studio, he does NFL. We talk the Bears, we talk Pete Carroll, we talk David Shaw just did his interview there a day ago. So it'll be a fun conversation. And as Jim referenced, he's suited, he's booted, he's got his tie on, he's got a tie on, he's got his mic clip on. It'll be really fun. So every one of our interviews, as you know by now, presented by our founding partner 76, keeping you in the know on the go. So as you are going between now and the champ game, you got NFL games, you got a lot happening, the transfer portal, you got coaching moves. Tap into this one. I think it'll be a really cool preview for the game that is upcoming in the first year of this expanded playoff. So let's welcome in Anthony Herron. As mentioned, good friend, dramatically talented, best smile in the business, Anthony Herron joins us. Big Ant, it has been one of my greatest joys to see a friendly face in my first year at the Big Ten Network. You work for the Big Ten. You work for NBC. You do SiriusXM. You do a little bit of everything. You talk about the Chicago Bears, obviously, and where you reside now in the Windy City. Today, I want to hit a little bit of everything, but mostly talk about what we have coming up in a matter of days. We've got Notre Dame and Ohio State. You're a formidable man in the trenches. This game potentially will be won, as always, in the trenches. I'm just kind of curious, big picture, having followed Ryan Day and his team for as long as you have. What has stood out for you in terms of their journey this year as they find themselves in the final game of the season?
Kind of watching the evolution of Ryan Day and his time as the head coach in Columbus has been a pretty special thing to watch, where he takes over for such a legend in Urban Meyer, who followed one of the great coaches in program history in his own right, in Jim Tressel. And Tressel wins a national championship in year 2. Meyer wins one in year 3. And so that standard, that expectation has been there for Ryan Day, and now 6 years into his run and leading things in Columbus. So there's been so much of that expectation for him to navigate as a first-time head coach. That's really one of the remarkable things about the run he's been able to continue having this program on, is that he's been figuring a lot of this out in his first time with the big whistle. And yeah, it can be a jump if you're a group of 5 coach stepping up to the power conference level, or if you're switching conferences. Like, his predecessors certainly had some adjustments to make to life in Columbus. Ryan Day hadn't handled any of this, certainly not at this level before. And to see, the way that he's been able to take passing football, not just offensive football, but specifically the way that the Ohio State University can throw the ball with explosion and consistency, precision and efficiency. He stepped in as Urban Meyer's OC and really revitalized the passing attack for the Buckeyes. He's continued that as a head coach, but then also sort of in some ways riding the wave of figuring out, how do I make a team that had maybe gotten a little bit far afield in its finesse and its passing game to bolster that line of scrimmage, to put a level of importance on the way that they run the football and the way that his defensive front needs to be formidable against the opposing run. And we're seeing that best combination here playing out right now in the playoff. This is the most combined, most unified, most complete version of football I think any Ohio State team has played under Ryan Day.
Yeah, it's a really cool point. I think fans, or us as analysts, like, it's a treat when I think you get to watch a coach evolve in real time. Not necessarily the most comfortable thing for them, right? Like we saw it with Clay Helton, right, at USC when you were at the Pac-12 Networks. We've seen it with Ryan Day. It's not like he was at Bowling Green or at Utah, right? Like his predecessor, to your point. And I think the evolution is really cool. And then watching them work through things, even on grand stages, I think is a challenge for them, and of course their families and loved ones. But also when they make it through it, I think is a really cool illustration of the craft. So let's talk about the craft on Monday night in this game. You just referenced the trenches. What are your thoughts about this game, and what have you noticed even about Notre Dame and what they could pose as potential issues for a team that's playing like they are the best team in America in the Buckeyes?
So much credit to Marcus Freeman for the stage that he's been able to have his team command to get to this point. Because, Brian Kelly won at a really high level. You look at the last 4 seasons of success that either of these individual programs had before the current head coach took over. Notre Dame was winning double-digit games every season, getting to college football playoff or BCS national championship game appearances. Brian Kelly's one of the great coaches in America and was having exceptional success in leading Notre Dame. And now Marcus Freeman's taken this program over in his 3rd year in, getting them to this stage while not taking the field with some overwhelming talent advantage. And he's still been able to, amidst a bunch of injuries on the offensive line and banged up at running back, all over the defense, but still able to find a way to have his team as locked in and focused and showcase a degree of roster depth for a variety of other players to be prepared to command that stage. Benjamin Morris goes out at corner. Leonard Moore steps in, and Al Golden is playing man coverage out of love of the no other team in the country with the volume and the effectiveness that they play it at in taking the football away, not just getting past deflections, but getting past interceptions. All that has combined to get Notre Dame to this point. But the trenches that you reference matter a lot. And as banged up as Notre Dame has been on the offensive line, they're going to have a really deep, talented, and yes, a bit banged up defensive front. We saw JT Tuimoloau turn his ankle in that game against Texas, but able to return and just sort of gut it out because he wants to be out there with his guys. But the line of scrimmage in this matchup will matter on each side of the ball. How can that Notre Dame offensive line at least stymie? You know, you're not just going to keep Ohio State from getting any pressure on Riley Leonard, but schematically, Riley Leonard has actually been better against the blitz than he has in clean pockets when he's just sort of playing quarterback. But when the blitz has forced him to just kind of get the ball out of his hands, to be decisive, to perhaps go off script, that's actually been when he's played some of his better football, at least from a completion and an explosive play perspective. But then conversely, how does that Notre Dame defensive front try and control an offensive line for Ohio State that's found itself in postseason play with some of the adjustments? And you and Jake Butt, I really love the breakdown you guys were giving heading into the semifinals of some of those adjustments to the run game that Chip Kelly and Ryan Day have made, going more gap scheme. And one of the terms I use for how Ohio State's offense has evolved, really even down the stretch of the regular season, there's more eye candy to it than there was before, both in the throw game and in the run game, where they test the eye discipline of the second and third level of the opposing defense. So there's going to be a lot for Notre Dame to try to navigate with the volume of man coverage that they tend to play. So, I mean, schematically, matchup-wise, it feels like one of those games that's going to make tough duty for Notre Dame's defense, but they can come at you in waves up front also. They got a variety of defensive linemen. Most of them aren't as highly recruited as the guys from the Buckeyes, but they've been playing some big-time football.
Yeah, they really have. I called a game last year, the finale of the regular season. It was Stanford, Notre Dame. Like, ironically, last game on the Pac-12 Network, which was just Ted and I, which, you know, he's a Golden Domer as well. But you got to be around Coach Golden, Marcus Freeman. Like, you just tell, like, it's a pretty well-oiled machine. Like, it's dialed. And I look at the path these two have been on. I think easily the most challenging path in the playoff. Like, nobody, you know, got a pass in their way here. I mean, they had to go through the SEC gauntlet, the Big Ten gauntlet, whatever it may be. The thing I want to ping you on is something you referenced at the end there, is like the recruiting, right? You're right. Jack Sawyer, JT, huge recruits. Other side, Notre Dame, some of them were, some of them have not. You've called the All-American Bowl in NBC, I feel like, for a decade. I don't know how many years it has been, Anthony, but what have you seen change as you go down and you're around these recruited athletes and you've seen the portal, NIL, high school recruiting classes from high school slowly diminish in numbers over the last 2 or 3 seasons? I'm curious, like, your takeaway on where we sit in recruiting right now with the experience that you had at that game.
Well, it's always a fun game to call. I know you get to be around those guys through a lot of their journey headed into college football and beyond it. And, you know, to have, you know, guys like, you know, whether it's Tua Tagovailoa, Trevor Lawrence, C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young, you know, we've had a lot of guys in this game over the years, and they've gone on to, you know, professional acclaim as well. And their path to kind of get there has been so unique to them, of course. But the way that recruiting has continued to evolve, it strikes me just where these teenagers are now in command in some ways of a personal business. It's almost like they're all individual small business owners, because they have to be in control of their personal brand in evaluating different opportunities that they'll have from one school to the next, whether, you know, the chief factor historically a lot of times has been playing time, scheme fit, you know, the personnel that will be around them, what's the vibe on campus, the investment and engagement of that fan base. But now there are so many additional financial ramifications that will come with that as well, and the contracts that are associated with it. And so there's grown-up decisions, grown-up partnerships that are being made here. And then in the end, you know, if they're not feeling it after a season or whatever, then they will have the opportunity to adjust and move on. But it's a lot more. There's so much more business within the business of it. And in my opinion, I think that it's a great thing. Will it continue to be massaged, adjusted? Will it keep evolving? I think it will. But these opportunities for young people, just like anyone else who's entering a college setting, you're wanting them to be prepared to become professionals in whatever aspect of their journey that ends up meaning, whatever career path they go down, you want them to experience things as a college person, as a student or a student athlete that will prepare them for life afterwards. So to get business experience in the way that college athletes now can through NIL, to make big decisions through the transfer portal. Maybe the grass isn't always going to be greener when they transfer. Perhaps mistakes get made when they do. But the goal is that there should be life experience that's gained from that as well. So again, I do think things will continue to be tweaked and evolve. They're talking about paring down back to one transfer portal window and when that would take place. There's some discussion and conjecture about that. But I just love that there's an opportunity for some agency in the process, and that it's not just about getting the same scholarship that folks have been getting for decades anymore. So many of us in the media, so many conferences and television networks are getting enriched around college football in a way that's never been seen before. So the fact that now you see the student athletes able to do that, able to have additional compensation beyond just room and board, that they were getting when we were in school, then I love it.
Yeah, you're so well. It's so well said, man. So thoughtful. That I'm a Pete Carroll fan. I'm on the train for Pete. Also a huge Caleb Williams fan. Roma Dunze, guys that you and I have talked about for many years. Before we cut you loose here, thoughts on the job? And I know it's almost noon Central Time, so who knows if a head coach will be named by the time this episode drops. But give us some insight, because people on the West Coast are really curious, and I think Pete Carroll just keeps coming up to me in every conversation that I have, and the Bears and Caleb, of course, a natural tie with SCB and the Bridge.
And how much better could it get than the leadership that Pete Carroll can provide, and what he's shown in being a leader at every spot that he's been at before this point. And there's a lot of folks, because of the passion of Bears fans and the fanaticism that's there, the hunger to see immediate results. And it had big expectations coming into this season for Caleb, for the franchise, the wins that they were thought to be in a position to achieve. And none of that came to fruition. Now, I do think Caleb, as a rookie quarterback, played extremely well in an environment that just wasn't conducive to his success. And he still found success somehow in the midst of all that, and showed a degree of maturity that I'm really happy folks got to see. Now, I'm not happy the circumstances around him between the head coach and the offensive coordinator, the personnel. I really wish for Caleb that things for the Bears structurally would have been better for his success this year. But at least folks did get to see a mature young man that had so many questions about his maturity. And I never, and I know you and I have gotten to talk about Caleb quite a bit here over the last couple of years, I never had questions about Caleb's maturity off the field, at least whether or not that could transfer to the professional realm. Everyone's got to keep growing and maturing. But the maturity of Caleb's game, that's where the Bears have got to make sure they get the right head coach, whether that's offensive or defensive, to put Caleb in a position where his development will continue as a quarterback. Because by comparison to his contemporaries, Jaden Daniels, able to win a playoff game, able to ride that wave a bit in Washington, part of the reason why, 50-plus starts in college. Bo Nix, 50-plus starts in college. The time on task that Caleb has had just as a starting quarterback in critical moments just pales in comparison to some of the other guys who've been able to find some success as rookies here. So I think the sky's the limit for Caleb Williams, and I hope that they get some infrastructure in place in Chicago and leadership that's there that will be demanding of the personnel for the Bears to make sure that they're nurturing the skills of their rookie quarterback and putting a foundation around him that'll allow him to grow.
I love what you said, man. You bridge the maturity of the game with the maturity of a player on the field. And now in college, time on task is something that easily can happen. Look at Carson Beck continuing to play. Yeah. Quick prediction, if you have it, two quarterbacks, they got a lot of starts too, playing on Monday night. Where does your head go midweek in advance of the game on Monday night?
I think there's so much about this matchup schematically that seems to favor Ohio State personnel-wise. There's not a team in the country that Ohio State has to take a back seat to in personnel. And even you look at even just something, if we pare down just the specifics of Notre Dame's defense and the man coverage versus Ohio State, one of the things I thought Penn State would be able to capitalize on more was Nicholas Singleton out of the backfield against those Notre Dame linebackers. Nick Singleton isn't the pass route runner. He's not the pass receiver that TreVeyon Henderson is. And Drew Aller picked a bad time to have one of his worst games of the season. Will Howard's been on point the entire postseason. TreVeyon Henderson is a touchdown waiting to happen. So even if you see a game where for some reason Jeremiah Smith only gets 3 targets, which I don't think is going to be the case, but that to me is maybe the pivotal matchup in this contest, because you can just have the safe pass play. And as we saw at the end of that half against Texas, Travion Henderson can make it a 75-yard touchdown in a moment's notice. I really like this matchup for Ohio State. And they just seem to be playing with a focus and an intensity that has them on a path towards a national title.
Yeah, it's going to be fun, man. I hope we get another beautiful game. I know you are on your path right back to the studio. So tell Rick or Dave or whoever it is waiting for you in there. Thank you for the time. Yep. Okay, Mike, even better. Crack a joke. Tell Mike that I'm still waiting for him to come visit. He came over one time in our relationship, but it's been about 6 years. So I don't know if I did something wrong or whatever it is, but tell him we want him back at the Roth household, man. But thank you, Anthony. Really, you made my first year at the Big Ten so natural, so seamless. I feel like I've been there for really as long as I was in the Pac-12, which is crazy to say, as it hasn't even been a calendar year. But it's because of the people, many like you, man.
Yogs, I appreciate you, my friend. I was so happy between you and Double A, man, just seeing you guys. It gave me the warm fuzzies every time I got to do it. I'm really happy that you've been able to make this transition in the way that you have. And unsurprising, you do great work and you're a great dude. You're easy to be around. Everybody loves you, and content you deliver, that speaks for itself, man. I appreciate you.
You're the best, man. Well, love to your family. Congrats on all the stuff off the field, and look forward to catching up again soon.
All right, my friend. See you, Yokes.
It's the Afterglow. That was Anthony Herron, presented always by our founding partner, 76, keeping you in the know on the go, go, go. Jim Thornby, Yogi Roth. Jim, your takeaways, your thoughts from a conversation with Big Ant, Anthony Herron.
Well, I think you said it all in the intro to the interview of just, how versatile Anthony is, covering the Big Ten, covering the Bears, doing the All-American game every year. When he was in the Pac-12, he even hosted for a bunch of those weeks and stuff like that. So it's like he really is a talented guy, and obviously plugged into everything that's going on in that region. But it's good. What I really like, just on a personal level, is being able to follow him and understand what's going on with the Bears from afar, because I don't have the personal bandwidth to really keep up with that as much, but I can always see what does Anthony have to say about this, or because especially there's so many former Pac-12 guys there, where you got Caleb, you got Rome, you got Keenan Allen, there's a long list of former guys that we covered in the previous decade, all making their homes in Chicago. And that's one of my favorite things to do, is just to kind of keep up with each of those guys to see how they're succeeding at the next level. So it's just an incredibly nice person. So that makes it just that much better.
Yeah, I tell you, the thing that stood out to me was where we talked about the All-American game and how teenagers can be in command of their personal business. Yeah. As professionals to a certain degree now, with, you look at, he's meeting these guys as college evolves. We forget about high school, but it's going even more rapidly, right? So like the businesses, the LLCs, how they're viewing themselves. And I think on one hand, it's easy to I don't want to say mock it, but be like, those kids don't know what they're doing. And the other hand, it's like, well, you wouldn't say that to Ariana Grande, right? Or you wouldn't say that to an actor, or you wouldn't say that to
or a gymnast.
A gymnast. Yeah, no kidding, right? Or a baseball player, or whatever. So I think it's really cool perspective from him being down at that game around those young men, around how they're viewing it. I've been talking to the top linebacker in next year's class for a couple of years. I met him when he was 14. He's a rock star. And since I met him, I was like, this guy's just built different. And I think because the opportunities that are presenting themselves in front of these young athletes at a young age, we're not seeing the amount of immaturity that I think that is often anticipated. I think you're seeing the opposite. Now, it happens for sure, and guys are going to continue to not live up to their expectation. But I do think there's this awareness of, hey, I can build something pretty uniquely based off my high school career and my college recruiting prior to even playing a snap. Now, there's a whole world that we will get into in the offseason, how to navigate that. That's usually what I'm doing during the portal time. That's all I'm talking to players and parents about, is navigating that. So that's a different conversation. But that stood out to me from Anthony. And of course, he's always going to be detailed and dialed in on the college football. And again, we'll see him on Monday night at the Big Ten Network.
And to your point on that, this is just getting younger and younger, because the MVP of that All-American game was a class of 26 recruit. Half, we've been used to for years, seeing the guys come out and, in the middle, they come out of the game and then they would be on the sideline and then they cut away to that and they're, okay, I'm going to USC, I'm going to Oregon, so they did 8 commitments during the game. I think almost half of them were class of 26 guys. Wow. So that is just continuing to get younger and younger. Some of them, could wind up, maybe it's past the deadline. I should know this, but maybe it's past the deadline where they need to know now to reclassify. But you think of Juju Lewis, he should be in that 26 class. He reclassified during high school. So it's just, it's crazy how it is getting younger and younger and younger through this whole process.
Yeah, it's a great note. Juju's at bowl prep. Hassan Longstreet's at bowl prep. He's with the teams, right? We watched Achilles Smith Jr. run out at the Rose Bowl, right? Jaron Sakapatelli, same deal. Now he's at Cal. I'd be curious to see, maybe it's another conversation for us, but these high school bowl games. I grew up in the Big 33. Big 33 was the best in Ohio, best in Pennsylvania, top 33 players. It was your dream as a kid. You got on the watch list and then you made it to the semifinals. And when I didn't make it, my heart was broken. And the guy that went to Pitt as the scholarship receiver made it. And it was a driver for me, not a healthy one, but a driver, whatever. But these bowl games, are they going to exist? What's
evolve.
the point of them? Yeah. To your point. Yeah. Or evolve. I'll be curious. It makes the Elite 11 really the epicenter of recruiting. I say that because Elite 11 just announced the regional tour. So for the quarterbacks and the families listening, go to elite11.com. Check that out. Listen to a past episode with Elite 11 president Brian Stumpf. This is it for now. We got the weekend coming up. I'm going to be on my way to Chicago over the weekend. We'll be covering it on Y Option Social all Sunday, Monday, Tuesday long. I'll get back late Tuesday. We'll jump back at it on Wednesday, kind of give our review and dive into a couple fun items that I'm sure will just percolate and find their way to the top of the news stream. There will be one big one. There will be one big one. I could tell you're on the Paris Musketeers. So a little tease for your favorite international team. Big love to Anthony Herron. Big love to my wife. She's helped out as a producer here, making sure that the sun wasn't in my eyes the entire time while we're in the air. So Amy, big shout out. And Jim, you as well. Enjoy the Natty, folks. It's the final game of a long and glorious season. Peace.